Hokage I'll become stronger when I'm fishing. Chapter 281-300. Chapter 281. Surprise, code-named glutinous rice. Boom! The huge mace smashed on Yagami Kingdo's arm, and a dull roar erupted, but he couldn't make Yagami Kingdo take a step back. Continue. Iori Kingdo's eyes flashed with light, and he ordered the other party to continue. Hormes responded immediately. Starting to activate his abilities, he launched an attack on Yagami Kingdo like a storm, and used the tricks that Katakuri possessed one by one. Boom, boom, boom. The battle continued, and the corner of Yagami Kingdo's mouth showed a smile from time to time. He really underestimated his own soul incarnation. After the incarnation of one's own soul controls the body of Katakuri, the strength that can be exerted may be as much as 90% of Katakuri's. The only flaw is, there is no ability to predict the future. But even so, it's strong enough. Of Hormes in front of him still ranks among the ranks of the three disaster generals. As expected of the soul incarnation of Captain Yagami Kingdo. Gales stood at the door, looking at Yagami Sudo and Katakuri in battle, and his eyes changed slightly. He also didn't expect that the soul incarnation of Yagami Kingdo would be able to exert Katakuri's strength to such an extent. It's just a perfect fit. Enough. Facing another attack from Hormes, Yagami Kingdo slammed it into a ball of rice cakes and flew out, then waved his hand. The opponent immediately stopped. Katakuri. No, the name should disappear. Yagami Kingdo looked at the other party and pondered slightly. He couldn't make this kind of soul incarnation without limit. If he himself ate this devil fruit, he might be able to make more than 10. But now, the limit of Murasama's affordability is probably 5 or 6. As far as Iori Kingdo is concerned, 5 or 6 is nothing. As for Katakuri's latest name, Yagami Kingdo has long had glutinous rice, which is in line with the ability of the devil fruit, which is in line with Yagami Kingdo's stubborn opinion that he has no talent for naming. You stay at the base temporarily, put on your cloak, and don't let anyone know of your existence. After naming the other party, Yagami Kingdo gave an order to the glutinous rice. Yes. Glutinous rice responded calmly. It does not have the memory of Yagami Kingdo, nor the will of Yagami Kingdo, but only has a somewhat similar character to Yagami Kingdo, and a very simple consciousness. After processing the glutinous rice, Yagami Soto and Gertz returned to the laboratory. For those who are weaker than Katakuri, Yagami Kingdo doesn't plan to use his soul incarnation to make puppets. After all, his soul incarnation is probably only 6 at most 66. Every puppet to be controlled must at least have the power of Katakuri, otherwise it is not worth his soul incarnation to control. And after cutting out one soul incarnation, Yagami Kingdo couldn't cut the second one in a short period of time. He had to recover for a period of time, otherwise his will would be damaged. Nutomi will stay with you for the time being, don't let him do anything unless there is a last resort. Once he does, he has to deal with the aftermath. Yagami Kanto said solemnly at Gertz. Gels understood the importance of this matter, and nodded solemnly. If rumors of Katakuri becoming the puppet of Yagami Soto spread out, the other 4 Emperor pirates would immediately feel threatened. Even if they don't join forces, they will report great vigilance to the Yagami pirates. Even the world government and the navy will probably be moved by the wind. This is the power to shake the foundations of the world. Just imagine. If Yagami Kingdo can control 666 characters comparable to Katakuri's strength by himself, even if it is to attack the naval headquarters, it will not be a problem. Besides, after Yagami Kingdo, the characters to be controlled may not only be Katakuri. At this level, Kaido is also one of Yagami Soto's goals. That's all. Only he can have a huge force to rival the world government. Of course, this is just one of the alternatives. If Yagami Kingdo can find the fruit of the God Tree in the pirate world, and release the suppression of the power of the world, even if it is only by relying on his own strength, the multi-shadow clone technique that erupts is enough to make the whole world tremble. After returning to the empty island, Yagami Soto began to rest. After intending to recover from mental fatigue, he will cut out another soul incarnation to devour the hurricane fruit. Using the natural hurricane fruit to create a soul incarnation is far more powerful than using ordinary storms. Of this soul incarnation is even higher than that of glutinous rice. Yagami Kangdu has some expectations in his heart. A few days later, the intelligence force collected information about the Skylock and handed it over to Nina. On the other hand, Nina recorded the information and reported it to Yagami Soto. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 282, General Yingfu, Empress Hancock. The Admiral, Ino, who is the same era as General Marshal Cyborg, has never been able to escape a pirate from his hands. Everyone who encounters him is imprisoned in a dark prison, so he is also called the Great General Heavenly Lock. It turned out to be a person from that era. Yagami Kangdu's eyes flickered slightly. In the previous era, Sengoku and Zephyr were respectively admirals of the Navy, a vacant position of admiral. The government had always planned to let Karp succeed him, but Karp repeatedly refused to be promoted. The previous era, Steel Skeleton Kong and Tiansuo Yingfu were respectively admirals, but the third admiral was not vacant, and his title was Natural Disaster. However, when Cyborg Kong was promoted to be admiral of the Navy, the 2 admirals, Tiansuo and Natural Disaster, both retired without a trace, and disappeared abruptly from that period. Under the intentional blockade of the world government, the information on the heavenly locks and natural disasters has now become very few, and even the specific capabilities are unclear. However, Yagami Kangdu, who has played against Tiansuo once, knows that the opponent's ability is the fruit of superhuman gravity. Strength is extremely strong, and it is more difficult than the current admirals such as Chingzi Kizaru. Moreover, the gravity fruit is the upper fruit of the gravity fruit. If Fujitora encounters the opponent, it will be in great trouble, and Fujitora cannot be allowed to fight with it. If it wasn't for him making a scene in the Holy Land and robbing the contents of the core warehouse, I'm afraid this heavenly lock would never appear at all. There is no doubt that Skylock is one of the hidden forces of the world government. By the way, there is one more thing. After Nina stated Tiancha's information, she said, the merchant ship under our command was looted, and the loot was one of the Chiwahai. Well, when did Chiwahai's courage become so big? Yagami Kanto gave Nina a strange look. But when he thought that Chiwahai was a rebellious character, and the sand crocodile kept clamoring to take away Whitebeard's head, he didn't find it strange. Yagami Kangdu asked, which Chiwahai is it? Nina put her arms on her chest and said, after the merchant ship came back, the goods were all gone. The people on the boat have all turned into stone, and according to this sentiment, it should be the empress of one of the 7 Wuhai, Boyahan Cook. When referring to Empress Boyahan Cook, Nina's tone had a sense of meaning, and she looked at Yagami Kangdu with a half-smile. Change, it's the empress. That's really not easy to handle. If I remember correctly, 9 Snake Island should be in the Windless Belt. Yes. Nina nodded and said, although I can get the chart of 9 Snake Island, it's a bit whimsical to be able to come and go freely in the Windless Zone with the chart alone. The supergiant sea kings in the Windless Belt, their power should be feared even by people like Shiryu of the Rain. The rest of the giant sea kings and large sea kings are also a lot of trouble. A top-notch powerhouse like Shiryu of the Rain is not afraid of it, but these. If the sea kings swallow the boat with one bite, or smash the boat with one tail, then they will only be swimming in the windless sea. However, Nina's voice changed, and she said, it's not impossible, the naval warships are inlaid with sea towers at the bottom of the ship to avoid the perception of the sea kings. We can also imitate it here, or simply rob a warship. Leave this to Captain Shiryu, I think he will be happy to do it. Nina smiled. Deal with a Chiwahai. In terms of the power of the 8 gods pirates today, it is only necessary to dispatch one of the top teams at random. The 8 gods Kangdu thought of the scene of Shiryu of the Rain running to the 9 Snakes Island to kill, and he couldn't help but click his tongue and said, as soon as Shiryu makes a move, it won't stop. And hijacking the Navy's warships may not allow the Navy to take action. Then what do you mean? Nina tilted her head to look at Yagami Kangdu. 8 God Kangdu said calmly, I'll go there. The combat power of 9 Snake Island can't be ignored. Maybe it can become our new squad. Nina said with a half smile, is that so? I thought you wanted to see the legendary pirate queen's demeanor. Yagami Aoto just pretended not to hear what Nina said. Just kidding. Even if the female Emperor Hancock is recognized as a beauty at the top of the sea, so what? He is the 4th emperor who reigns in the New World, the strongest man in the world. How can he be charmed by a mere female emperor? And considering the Empress's hatred of the Tianlong people, it is not absolutely impossible for 9 Snake Island to become a force under the command of Wangguo and become a squad. Is more than enough to serve as a squad leader. Do you need to notify the entourage? Nina asked Soto Yagami. 8 God Kangdu shook his head and said, no need, just give me the chart. As expected, Nina took out a folded sea chart and handed it to Yagami Kangdu. The location of 9 Snake Island marked on the chart was not precise, but it was also locked in a small sea area. Much easier to find than the base of the science unit. Chapter 283. Target, 9 Snake Island. Go early, come back early, Captain. After handing the map to Yagami Soto, Nina smiled slightly. 8 Gods Kangdu took a look at the chart, thought for a moment, and said, you can go there too, there may be a historical stone tablet on 9 Snake Island. Yagami Kangta planned to let him follow, but this made Nina a little unexpected. But hearing that there may be a historical stone monument, the smile on her face changed, a little more serious. Okay. 9 Snake Island. Inside the palace of the Royal Palace. The Empress Hancock, who had just finished bathing, was wearing a luxurious bathrobe and resting on the couch. At this moment, a slightly impatient voice came. I heard that you robbed the merchant ship of the Yagami pirates. The previous emperor of the 9 Snake Island, Grandma Za, walked over with a snake stick. Several of Hancock's maids were shocked when they saw her mother-in-law. Including the 2 people who were guarding the door, they couldn't help but say, why? How is it, Grandma, where did you come in from? Hancock sat there with a calm face and said without raising his head, it's so noisy, shoot me out. Every time my mother-in-law can appear in her room when she wants to be quiet, the guard at the door is useless at all, and I don't know where it came from. Wait, Snake Princess. Mother-in-law waved the snake stick and shouted, the 8 Gods Pirates, the first 4 emperors who have made a sensation in the world now. Well, the 8 Gods Pirates. Sandasonia and Marie Groud, who were standing beside Hancock, suddenly changed their faces when they heard the words of their mother-in-law, showing shock. In this sea, there are almost no people who have never heard of the name of the 4 emperors. If there were, they were basically idiots. What's more, the Iori pirates also defeated the Whitebeard Sea some time ago. It became the strongest and most terrifying pirate force in this sea, and its prestige shocked the whole sea. The 2 sisters looked at each other and couldn't help but think of the picture of winning the merchant ship. No wonder the captain of the merchant ship was frightened, but said in a stern tone that they were not allowed to provoke people. Before the other party could say the next few words, Hancock had already started directly, turning a boatload of people into stone. She said she didn't want to listen to the other party's long-winded. Although Sandasonia and Marigold were familiar with the name of the Yagami pirates, they did not know that it was a merchant ship under the Yagami pirates. After a boatload of people was turned to stone by Hancock, they didn't think much of it. He directly led his subordinates to carry things and rob the merchant ships. The 8 Gods. There was a slight fluctuation in Hancock's calm pupils. People around her are very clear about her character, extremely proud, narcissistic, domineering, and willful, but she has nothing to do with the word stupid. Just like in the original book, the world government sent flying squirrels to invite Hancock to participate in the top war, she is very clear about the consequences of not participating, even without Luffy's participation. In the end she may go to the top war. Sex is also great. Can be seen from the fact that she accepted the Shichibukai Treaty a long time ago, and for this, suppressed the deep disgust and hatred for the world government and the Tianlong people. That's right, it's that Iori pirates. The grandmother said solemnly. This pirate group must not be provoked. Snake G, you robbed the other party's merchant ship. They will never give up, and the 9 Snake Island may be destroyed for this. Listening to what my mother-in-law said was terrible. Both Sandersonia and Marigold's expressions changed drastically, showing a trace of panic, and they all looked at Hancock. However, the slender Jade pointed to Hancock, who had paused for a while, but continued to gently stroke his hair with his fingers, and said, "It's annoying, throw it out for me." Mother-in-law's face froze, and she said with an incomparable headache, "Wait. Snake Princess, now send someone to send the things back. Maybe the situation can be saved. Otherwise what?" Hancock stood up, with an emotionless indifference on his pretty cheeks, stared at Granny Za, and said, "Even if they looted their merchant ship, what would happen?" Speaking of this, Hancock's frost-like face suddenly showed a pitiful gesture, saying, "This kind of thing, this king will definitely be forgiven." PFF'd. The mother-in-law and the many female guards present all made their hearts beat faster because of the Empress's expression. Even if they were both females, they couldn't hold it back. Breaking free from the charm of the Empress, the mother-in-law opened her teeth and danced her claws unbearably and said, "Now is the time to pretend to be tender, Snake Girl." Enough. Hancock walked to the side of Granny Za, grabbed her hair, and his face returned to the iceberg and domineering of the Empress. "This king doesn't want to hear your nagging anymore." Holding her mother-in-law's hair, Hancock raised his hand and threw it out of the window directly under the strange cry of her mother-in-law. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 284, Hancock's Determination. "Ah, Lord Snake G, why do you treat grandma-in-law like this?" The guards next to him were all sweating coldly on their foreheads. Hancock turned his head, 2 faint blushes appeared on his cheeks, revealing a perfectly perfect expression, and said with pity, "Accidentally." The female guards present were attacked again. That's right. It's inevitable that anyone will be careless. After throwing his mother-in-law out, Hancock returned to the couch and said in a flat tone, "You all go out, Sonda, Mary and you too." Numerous guards responded and left the room, while Sandersonia and Marigold looked at each other and saw the tension in each other's eyes, but at this moment they could only helplessly leave the room. Time cannot go back. Looting merchant ships is looting merchant ships. Not to mention that some of the goods have been consumed, and even if they are not consumed, it does not mean that the conflict can be resolved by sending them back as they are. What's more, they know Hancock's character too well, and there is almost no possibility of bowing their heads. Even if the other party is Yagami Kangdu, he banned Whitebeard and became the strongest man in the world today. Even with his strength, he has become the head of the 4 emperors worthy of the name, and even the world government is helpless. However, when I thought that this was 9 Snake Island, located in the windless zone, it was extremely difficult to get here, and it was even possible to encounter supergiant sea kings, and my heart felt a little slower. Taking advantage of this geographical advantage, that the 8 gods pirates may not be able to do anything to 9 Snake Island. After the guards and both sisters left, Hancock was the only one left in the room. She sighed softly and lowered her head. Hancock is not stupid, on the contrary, hidden under the willfulness and arrogance is a wise heart. From the moment she knew that the merchant ship robbed the other day belonged to Yagami Kangdu, she had already understood the seriousness of this matter. But it's not as easy to solve as my mother-in-law said. The status of Chiwahai is only attached to the world government. Provoked by the 4 emperors, it is a fantasy to seek help from the government and the navy. As for sending the goods back, that's a stupid idea. What's more, she also has her own personality, and she takes the things she grabs and sends them back. and then bow to others, even death is impossible. If not so, it is impossible for her to have the domineering look of overlord. This world. Hancock's slender fingers clenched slightly. She clenched her silver teeth lightly, revealing not tenacity, but fragility. No matter how self-willed and domineering she was, there was always an unchangeable, most vulnerable place in her heart, which was evident from her unwillingness to let anyone know that she was once a slave. In fact, with absolute strength and domineering, how could it not suppress a mere 9 Snake Island? Because of this, her strength is strong, but it is also stagnant at one level. Including her domineering arrogance, it is also inferior to Doflamingo. Just when Hancock sat there alone, all the feelings in his heart were revealed on the surface. A slightly panicked voice came from outside the door. "Lord Snake, there are enemies." The previous moment was still there. Hancock, who squeezed his calf and clenched his silver teeth lightly, took a deep breath the next moment. All expressions instantly subsided, returning to the stance of the pirate empress. She stepped down from the seat, and as soon as she walked out of the room, she saw a nervous guard standing there. "What enemy?" Hancock asked. Guard's voice trembled slightly and said, "Yes. The 8 Gods Pirates." Hancock glanced at her and said coldly, "So you were scared into such a useless thing, go away." After shouting, she walked directly outside the palace. Hancock's rebuke did not break the guard's mentality. Instead, after the guard's expression changed a few times, he showed a hint of perseverance, and he followed up with his weapon. 9 Snake Island, coast. With the flag of the Yagami pirates is docked on the coast. At this moment, a fierce conflict is breaking out on the coast. A large number of warriors appeared on the side of 9 Snake Island, and more people were still there. A steady stream of them came. Of the 8 Gods Pirates, there were only 2 people who got off the boat. Yagami Kanto, Nina. In the face of the numerous 9 Snake Island warriors coming in, the expressions of the 2 of them were very calm. Even Yagami Kengdu didn't make a move, but stood there with his hands on his back. Nina alone was able to block all the soldiers from 9 Snakes Island. Swept away like a swept one after another, and no one could stop it. Today's Nina, her strength has entered a bottleneck. She doesn't have a strong desire to become stronger, so this bottleneck is almost impossible to be broken. You don't even want to become stronger, then it's useless no matter how forced you are by external forces. Besides, Yagami Kengdu didn't really care, her current fighting power was enough. No need to become stronger. She is not a fighter who rushed to the front line to shout and kill. Chapter 285. Nina is proud of her power, the 4 Emperors of Terror. But, even so, Nina's strength is not like these 9 Snake Island warriors can compare. In this world, combat is the catalyst for strength. Nina has followed Yagami Kanto for too long, fighting all the way from the bottom to the present. Is a fully qualified member of the 4 Emperors Pirates, and her combat power is enough to match her 400 million reward. Even if it is not as good as Doflamingo, the level of the 3 disaster generals. But it is only one level inferior, still extremely powerful. Facing groups of female warriors from 9 Snake Island rushing over, Nina's eyes were calm. Whole body was covered with blue steam, and shock waves burst out one after another. But Nina didn't kill her, because Yagami Kengdu's plan to come this time was not to destroy 9 Snake Island. Instead, plant the flag of the 8 Gods Pirates on 9 Snake Island. Everyone stepped back. Just when Nina defeated many female fighters from 9 Snake Island with one enemy, Hancock's 2 sisters Sundarsania and Marigold finally arrived. Originally, they also wanted to try their best to not get along with the Iori pirates, but when they saw that the conflict on the coast was out of control, and the people on their side fell to the ground one after another under Nina's hands, they couldn't help roaring and rushing up. Day Tiger. Nina's face was light, and she clenched her fists and waved. The terrifying white tiger roared and charged out, meeting Sandasonia and Marigold who were rushing over. Sandasonia and Marigold were amazed at Nina's doppelganger, but didn't stop. They each waved their weapons and slashed sharply. Boom! The two collided, and the terrifying wind pressure swept out. However, it was not as before, completely defeated by Nina, and Sandasonia and Marigold had the spare strength to continue their work. Swinging his weapon, he slashed violently towards Nina. Nina's eyes flickered, her hands were interlaced, and her arms showed a domineering jet black armed color. Sandasonia and Marigold were repelled, but Nina was unscathed. Domineering. This level of domineering. Sandasonia and Marigold are also able to use. Domineering powerhouse. From this blow, it is judged that the strength of Nina's armed color is far higher than them. On this Nine-Snake Island, I am afraid that only Cook's armed color can confront this person in front of him. But at this level, even if the two women knew it was difficult to beat Nina, had to bite the bullet, swing his weapon, and continue to slash at Nina. Nina smiled and moved strangely, making it very difficult to capture her heart movements. A crisp snapping sound in the hands of Sandasonia and Marigold were easily shattered by Nina's fists. Immediately after, Nina waved her hands, and the shock wave exploded, blasting Sandasonia and Marigold out. Smoke billowed, and the two sisters Sandasonia and Marigold flew upside down and landed on the ground, extremely embarrassed. How could this happen? Even Lord Sonda and Lord Mary, the many female warriors of Nine-Snake Island nearby, couldn't help trembling in their hearts when they saw this scene, and a trace of fear surged up. Their strength is much weaker than that of Sandasonia and Marigold. Now, even Sandasonia and Marigold are no match for the woman in front of me. Moreover, the most terrifying thing is not the woman in front of him, but the man standing by the coast with his hands behind his back. Most of them don't know Nina, but for Yashin Kangdu, the Four Emperors, many people recognize it. Even if Nine-Snake Island is isolated from the outside world, after all, it is necessary to go out to loot from time to time. Occasionally get a newspaper or a bounty or something. You can always learn the news of Yagami Kangdu, a terrifying existence standing at the top of the sea. Cough. Both Sandasonia and Marigold, who were swept away, had a trace of blood dripping from the corners of their mouths. The two looked at each other and saw the troubled look in each other's eyes. After provoking the Eight Gods pirates, they guessed that the other party might not let it go, but they didn't expect to call at the door so soon. And most importantly, Yagami Kangdu himself didn't do anything at all, just a woman by his side already beat them to a rout. The Four Emperors are too terrifying. It is rumored that the Nine-Snake Island, where all the people are warriors, doesn't seem to be very good. Nina saw that some people nearby were timid and did not dare to rush up. He stopped involuntarily and smiled lightly. Yagami Kanto stood by the shore with his hands behind his back, but his eyes were on Nina. He had never seen a few scenes where Nina easily defeated the enemy and scared the other party away from stepping forward. Speak up. Nina's heart is deep, although it is white kindness. But on the outside, there is a bit of rottenness and a black belly. Of course, the most important thing that made Yagami Aoto hard to let go of Nina was that this woman was too smart. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 286. The negotiation breaks down, and the queen takes action. He always knows what to do when, and occasionally pranks Yagami Kangdu to express his dissatisfaction, which is just when it won't arouse any resentment from Yagami Kangdu. And when Yagami Kanto needs something else, Nina is always the quickest to notice. People in this world who can do this. Hearing Nina's teasing words, many female warriors of Nine-Snake Island became a little annoyed and gritted their teeth for a while. Some people with hot personalities, under the stimulation of Nina's words, their anger overwhelmed their fear. He rushed towards Nina again, trying to keep fighting with Nina. Bang, bang. Nina's expression remained unchanged. With a slight smile, she greeted the rushing crowd. She doesn't have many skills in melee combat, but she is the closest person to Yagami Kanto. No matter what, It will not be bad, the body movements are light and flexible. Yagami Kanto smiled and watched. Admiring Nina's battle is not a taste. But just as Nina was walking through the crowd, everyone fell to the ground wherever she went, and no one could resist. Figure suddenly appeared from the crowd. Wearing a bright red cheongsam, with 9 snake earrings on her delicate earlobes, her long black hair flutters in the air with the movements of her limbs, making it soft and supple. Aromatic feet. Bang! Hancock kicked Nina back with his sweet fruit ability. Nina slowed down and looked sideways at the person who came. Huh. Didn't need any introduction, just a glance, she was sure of the woman in front of her. That is the pirate queen who makes many people dream of, but is timid and dare not offend. Even with Nina's current vision, she has to admit that the woman in front of her does have the temperament that fits the title of pirate queen. You are from the Yagami pirates. After Hancock repelled Nina, he attacked Nina's body. Instead, he stood where he was, and asked in a slightly contemptuous and somewhat arrogant tone. If Nina was a man, I'm afraid she would be too lazy to say a word. If it's a woman, it doesn't make you feel disgusted at first glance. Captain of the 5th Division, Nina. Nina looked at Hancock, scrutinized the other party, and held her chin in her jade hand. Our merchant ship was looted a few days ago. It should be your hands. I think we should not wrong people. Hancock's expression was calm, and suddenly he raised his hand lightly and said, this king is very interested in their goods, so he took them over. Did you get angry? The first half of the sentence is quite normal, but the second half of the sentence has already used the ability of sweet fruit. Coupled with her own charm, even Yagami Kanto standing by the coast couldn't help shaking his head in his heart. If it weren't for his strong mental strength, his thoughts would have been hooked. Nina's cheeks were also slightly red, and she immediately had the idea of forgiving the other party. But still immediately, he reacted and suppressed the discomfort in his heart. On the way here, Yagami Kanto talked to her about the Empress, saying that the Empress's charm is very strong. Of the sweet fruit, it can kill men, women and children. She just laughed at that time. Now that I met him, I knew that what Yagami Kanto said was true, and I felt a headache in my heart. Just when she was thinking about how to deal with it, Hancock spoke again. It is still a word that exudes an irresistible charm. Those goods are very important to this king. Can you not hold me accountable? Second half of the sentence had a bit of a pitiful taste, and even with Nina's calm and dark personality, she couldn't hold it back. The great thing about Hancock is that charisma has an effect on anyone. Coupled with her domineering arrogance, the double stack can create a sweeping effect. The will and strength are below a certain range, and there is no resistance in front of her. And even if it is above that, it will not be able to exert its full power because of the influence. To know. Even the Lieutenant General of the Naval Headquarters had to stab himself to resist Hancock's power. Hancock stood on top of the harbor during the war. Activate the sweet fruit ability, and say, can you stop fighting? The concubine is so afraid. I am afraid that it will sweep the audience immediately. It's okay if you don't pursue it. Nina took a deep breath, suppressed the restlessness in her heart, and said calmly, as long as you give up your status as the king of the 7 Marshall Seas, and led 9 Snake Island to join us. The goods are something as equivalent to internal consumption, so there is no need to pursue it. Hearing that the other party asked him to give up the name of Chihuahua and led 9 Snake Island to surrender, it was naturally impossible to make such a concession with Hancock's personality. My king likes the title of Chihuahua under the king very much, and this king doesn't like to obey orders very much. Look at this, your ship suffered a strange accident, and everyone turned to stone. Hancock spoke lightly, still exuding his own charm from time to time. Under the ability of sweet fruit, charm is equivalent to hidden attack power. Chapter 287. Super Charm, Nina, Defeat. Nina said coldly, do you think it's possible? Then, don't blame this king. Hancock raised his chin slightly, and his whole body suddenly turned into an afterimage, rushing towards Nina. Wrapped in a gust of fragrant wind, the figure crossed a perfect arc in the air. Even though Nina had raised her vigilance, when Hancock attacked. Affected by the sweet fruit, I couldn't help but feel a little lost. Boom. Just. This moment of distraction made Nina unable to activate her abilities. He could only wave his arms to resist, and under Hancock's horizontal kick, he retreated to the rear. Hancock didn't pause at all, and the whole person continued to move forward, kicking continuously. Bang, bang, bang. Under the influence of Hancock's charm, Nina is forced to resist continuously. After blocking several attacks, she jumped back. With his arms folded in front of him, he will release his ability to deal with Hancock. But at this moment, Hancock's eyes flashed slightly. A domineering arrogance suddenly aroused and pressed towards Nina. Originally under the influence of charm, the strength was greatly disturbed. At this moment, bearing another domineering arrogance, Nina's 8-door dungeon ability suddenly failed to activate. Leaving aside charm and overbearing sex, just talking about physique and two-color domineering, Nina at the moment is not inferior to Hancock, the difference between the two is not big. But with the dual effects of charm and overlord color, it's immediately widened the gap. This is because Nina herself is a woman, and she has followed Yagami Kangdu for many years and has seen all kinds of domineering situations. The influence of charm or domineering arrogance alone would be enough to widen the gap. Bang! The ability to activate failed, and Hancock's side kick made Nina extremely embarrassed. Although the arm is armed with color, the domineering is also vaguely showing signs of being scattered. If the armed color is scattered by Hancock, it will undoubtedly turn into a stone and shatter when kicked by him, which is extremely dangerous. Realizing that she was not Hancock's opponent, Nina couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Before she came, she fought with Yagami Kangdu, and Yagami Kangdu once said with a smile that she could go and have a try with the Empress to see if she would be affected by the charm of the other party. As a result, it was indeed influenced by the charm of the other party. And she was obviously a woman. Nina felt annoyed in her heart. Bang! In the next instant, Hancock kicked Nina's arms away. Continued to land on Nina's chest, to completely defeat Nina. But at this moment, the ground suddenly rolled. Wow! A huge piece of soil suddenly turned up, making everyone present unsteady and swaying for a while. Hancock's kick hit the rock that turned up and shattered it. But Nina's figure has retreated to a safe distance. Her eyes changed slightly, and she looked sideways at the coast. There, Yagami Kangdu stood with his hands behind his back, looking towards this side with a calm gaze. Came here just now. Nina was fighting with her subordinates, so her attention was all on Nina, ignoring the Yagami Kanto on the shore. At this moment, she finally noticed Yagami Kanto. It's obviously not Nina's ability just now, and the perception of seeing and hearing is also the power extended by Yagami Kangdu on the shore. Being able to defeat Nina, her strength is indeed as rumored, and she is fully qualified to be the captain of the Wanguo squad. What do you think? Yagami Kangdu walked forward calmly. Didn't show any momentum, and it didn't show the domineering look of the king. But as Yagami Kangdu came step by step, the atmosphere in the arena became depressed bit by bit. There was a rare dignified look in Hancock's eyes, putting aside things like identity, in her perception, the man in front of her. Very strong. You are Yagami Kangdu. Hancock looked at Yagami Soto, who came over and asked. There was no disgust in his tone, but a hint of inexplicable meaning. This makes Yagami Kangdu a little strange. When will his charm in turn affect Hancock's attitude? Snake Princess, promise him. Granny Zha walked over from the back leaning on a snake stick and said, if you are under the banner of the 8 Gods Pirates, there is no. The name of Chiwahai can be used. The government and the navy will not act rashly on 9 Snake Island. Who was the same age as Hancock, who was standing there, the grandmother couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Hancock is already the emperor of 9 Snake Island once in 100 years. Of Yagami Kangdu is still above Hancock. At such an age, he was one of the 4 emperors, and he was on the sea. Moreover, he also kicked Whitebeard out of the strongest position in the world. Of aptitude and strength, Yagami Kangdu is undoubtedly the most dazzling existence in this era. As for Hancock's attitude towards Yagami Kangdu, she knows what's going on. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 288, Huge Gap, Peak Overlord. In the past, the 8 gods Kangdu had killed Tianlong people, and more than once, more than one. There was a lot of uproar about these things, and news was also received on the 9 Snake Island side. In a trance for a long time after he got the newspaper. Only later did she find out that one of the Tianlong people killed by Yagami Kangdu happened to be the one who once forced Hancock to eat the sweet fruit. So far, Hancock only had a different attitude towards 2 people. One is the Murloc tiger, who saves her from the sea of misery. Other is Yagami Kangdu, who directly killed the Tianlongren who enslaved her back then. Hancock didn't speak. Looked calm on the surface, but her heart was constantly ups and downs. Her attitude towards Iori Aoto is complicated. Tianlongren against Yagami Kangdu, full of the joy of venting hatred. Other hand, she didn't want Yagami Kanto to know about this, that she used to be a slave of the Tianlong people. Really faced Yagami Kangdu, she didn't know how to treat it. Benefactor and enemy, this king doesn't listen to the idea of being driven by others. Hancock finally spoke slowly. Regardless of her attitude towards Yagami Kanto, she was unwilling to do anything like surrender. As arrogant as she is, it is impossible to live below others. Of Chiwahai under the king is only a cooperative relationship with the government. And as the captain of the Wanguo squad, that is to fully devote himself to the 8 gods pirates. This sentence was said slowly, with a touch of refreshing charm. However, the will of Yagami Kangdu is so strong that not many people in the whole world can compare it. Of the sweet fruit naturally cannot play a role on Yagami Kangdu. It's a pity. Yagami Kangdu put his fingers on the hilt of Murasama's sword and said calmly, "You only have 2 choices, one is to join actively, and the other is to join passively." Hearing Yagami Kangdu's words, Hancock's eyes suddenly turned cold. She used to be a slave of the Tianlong people, and later became the pirate queen. She suffers from this attitude of trying to force her. Of course, other attitudes won't be good either. She is self-centered. All judgments are based on oneself. Shiji, what are you hesitating about? Mother-in-law was standing next to her, and when she saw the change in the attitudes of the 2 parties, she couldn't help but get anxious, and said to Hancock, "You know who he is." In front of him is the 4 emperors who defeated Whitebeard, Yagami Kangdu. Now that the deity has come to the 9 Snake Island in person, if he goes against him, the 9 Snake Island is likely to perish. However, mother-in-law's reminder not have a positive effect, but it even aroused the resistance in Hancock's heart, saying, "Shut up. This king is the emperor of 9 Snake Island. Looks like you're going to choose the second option." Yagami Kangdu looked at Hancock and spoke calmly. He's not a submissive character, he won't get used to each other just because of Hancock's charm. This kind of woman who is easy to cause trouble, Yagami Kangdu also considers the other party's appearance to be more eye-catching. Strength is also very good, and I have plans to recruit them. But this solicitation also includes a premise, that is, complete submission. If you don't obey, what's the use? This king is absolutely impossible to obey anyone. Hancock's cold opening also directly expressed his attitude. Although Yagami Kangdu's domineering personality is not bad. But on her own, that's what she wants to resist. Then, just resist and try. Yagami Kangdu spoke calmly, and the whole person took a step forward. Whoosh! Almost in an instant, Yagami Kangdu came directly to Hancock's front, and the speed was almost unbelievable. Even though the 9 Snake Island warriors who were present were watching Iori Kingdu vigilantly and unleashing their domineering arrogance, they couldn't make any response. Hancock barely caught the movements of Iori Kingdu, but it was too late to fight back. Can only display the domineering of armed color and parry with arms. Bang! With one move, Hancock flew backwards. Lord Snake Princess. Yagami Kingdu's sudden action made the expressions of everyone present change drastically. Panic and gritted teeth were intertwined on the faces of countless people. Marigold and Sandersonia, even more so, rushed up. Matter if he is the 4th emperor or what, it is absolutely impossible to hurt Sister Hancock. However, Yagami Sudo has no plans to fight Marigold and the others. Or rather, these people didn't even have the idea of letting him lift a finger. In the body like an ordinary human, a terrifying aura suddenly swayed. The black cloak rose up in an instant, as if a strong wind was blowing. In an instant, heaven and earth are silent. This tyrannical arrogance is far stronger than Hancock, and with an unstoppable stance, he swept across all directions. Of 9 Snake Island were all stiff in place almost instantly. Like reaping wheat, it fell in pieces. Chapter 289, Spike, shocked Hancock. Even the captains of the guards who can withstand Hancock's tyrannical look can't hold on under Yagami Kingdu's tyrannical look. His eyes rolled, and he fell to the ground one after another. Bah, tyrant's color. Marigold and Sandersonia, because they followed Hancock all the year round, barely kept their consciousness. But the two of them were trembling all over, covered in cold sweat, and could not keep standing. Holding his weapon tightly to support his body, he barely managed to not fall. Looking at Yagami Kingdu's eyes, there was a deep sense of horror and fear. Just being domineering and domineering has made them lose their ability to fight, making it difficult for them to move even a single finger. This is the 4 emperors, the 8 gods Kingdu. Far away. Who was hit by Yagami Kingdu and flew out, turned over perfectly in the air, barely landing smoothly. What followed was the oppression of Yagami Kingdu. The overlord in her body was oppressed, immediately. It erupted naturally, confronting Yagami Kingdu's overlord color in the air, making the whole world dark in an instant. Creak creak. There is still one person who did not pass out, and that is the mother-in-law. But at the moment, she was also holding the snake stick, so she could barely stand. Under this tyrannical look, the aging body made a creaking sound of bones, as if it was about to be crushed by oppression. Snake Princess. She looked in Hancock's direction with difficulty. As an informant, she is well aware of Yagami Soto's strength. Is definitely not something that Hancock can resist. What is there to resist at this time? However, Hancock ignored the mother-in-law. Although her domineering arrogance is a bit weaker than Yagami Kingdu, she still has a tyrannical appearance and is not greatly affected. However, realizing that Yagami Kingdu's domineering arrogance is far stronger than his own, Hancock's eyes still flashed an inexplicable light. Howling wind. With Yagami Kanto and Hancock as the center, they swayed in all directions. In this domineering conflict, Yagami Kingdu slowly walked towards Hancock. His face was calm and poised, without any hesitation. While Hancock faced the approaching Yagami Kingdu, the pressure increased a little. Under this oppression, she finally remained. Holding, he shot at Yagami Kingdu. Captive arrow. A pink peach heart appeared in front of her chest, and Yujao peach heart pulled. Daoshin bounced like a bow and arrow, and countless pink arrows swept towards Yagami Kingdu. However, in the face of Hancock's move, Yagami Kingdu just waved the black cloak with his arm, and then scattered the countless pink arrows. Armed color. Hancock's pupils shrank, and with her strength, it was natural to judge that Yagami Kingdu was using his armed arrogance to break up the arrow of her captives. That Iori Kingdu just showed is undoubtedly much stronger than hers. This gap is like when she first learned domineering, facing the senior-level armed arrogance of the previous 9 Snake Island Emperor the same. A chasm like a chasm. Still. Even if Yagami Kangdu showed his tyrannical and outrageous strength, she still did not intend to give in. With sweat dripping from her forehead, she gritted her silver teeth. She didn't believe that her charms would have no effect on Yagami Kangdu. Sweet, sweet wind. Facing the approaching Yagami Kangdu, Hancock made a peach heart shape with his fingers, inspiring the most fundamental ability of the sweet fruit. When this ability is activated, as long as the enemy is affected by her charm, it will directly change into stone. Unless, use the full body armor to resist. But what makes Hancock unbelievable is that Yagami Kangdu didn't even move to avoid it. He walked over directly like this and endured this wave of attacks. The sweet and sweet pink light passed through Yagami Kangdu's body, but it failed to cause any effect. This seems almost unbelievable to Hancock. After eating the sweet fruit and escaping from the holy land of Mary Joa, her charm has continued to increase with time. There is no one who can completely ignore her charm, let alone a man, not even a woman can resist. But the Iori Kangdu in front of him turned out to be completely ignoring. This is not to block it with armed color, nor to avoid it, but to ignore it directly. It can be done. It means that the man in front of him has no idea about her at all. Under the shock, Hancock even doubted his life. It's normal to be unable to beat Yagami Kangdu. But his own charm has no effect on Yagami Kangdu at all, which is a bit too bizarre. Is there only these means? Yagami Kangdu walked to Hancock and looked at her flatly. You. Hancock looked at Iori Kangdu, and the whole person couldn't help staggering. There was a great panic in his heart, and there was a faint trace of rare fear. Something completely unexpected made her mind completely confused. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 290, 9 Snake Island Surrenders, The Shaking World Government. Submit or die. Yagami Kangdu moved forward step by step, making Hancock's eyes keep flickering. Facing an impossible enemy like Yagami Kangdu, she finally changed her insistence. This king, need to think about it. Hancock finally said this. The domineering and pride in her heart made it impossible for her to give in like this. But apart from narcissism and willfulness, she wouldn't make the act of pulling everyone on 9 Snake Island to be buried with her. The shock of Yagami Kangdu ignoring her charm and influence has not disappeared even now. Silently, Yagami Kangdu's overlord color receded like a tide. He looked at Hancock, raised the blade, and took it away from Hancock's neck. In the scabbard, he stared at Hancock thoughtfully. He doesn't have the ability to read minds, but he is extremely domineering, allowing him to roughly capture the emotions in Hancock's heart. Being stared at by Yagami Kanto so much, Hancock felt a wave of discomfort in his heart. An inexplicable tinge of redness appeared on his cheeks. He turned his head and said, "Don't stare at this king so rudely." That she didn't speak, but when I spoke, Iori Kangdu was slightly startled, and immediately stared at her with a hint of interest. What arrogance is this? A few days later. In a hidden cave somewhere in the back mountain of 9 Snake Island. I didn't expect there to be a historical stone monument. Bringing Nina to find the historical stone tablet, Yagami Soto originally just talked about it. Because in memory, there is no such thing as a historical stone tablet on 9 Snake Island. But after searching the 9 Snake Island carefully, I didn't expect it to exist. The history of 9 Snake Island. Nina came to the historical stone monument and read it word by word. This is an ordinary historical stele, which records the history of 9 Snake Island. Not the history of intelligence, nor the history of road signs. However, even if it is an ordinary historical stone tablet, Nina is also concerned about it. The past few days, in addition to finding the historical truth, Hancock also finally chose to lead the 9 Snake Island to return to the One national flag. It is said that it is a surrender, but in fact it is hung up on one. The banner of the 8 gods pirates. Just like today's Fishman Island, the kingdom of Dresjelziza. Both of these countries are under the banner of the 8 Gods Pirates and are listed under the 10,000 flags. Yagami Kangdu wondered whether to send Hancock to Wangguo. But after thinking about it, it is better to leave it on Nine Snake Island, so as not to cause a lot of troubles to deal with. Half a month later, one of the pirate queens, one of the 7 seas under the king, openly rescinded the contract with the world government. The contract of the 7 seas, and joined the 8 Gods Pirates. When the news came out, the world shook. No one thought that the arrogant queen would be conquered by others. However, Yagami Kangdu, who is standing in the strongest position in the world, really has this qualification. Countless people who had unreasonable thoughts about the Empress couldn't help but sigh after learning the news. But due to the strength of Yagami Kangdu, they quickly gave up their unrealistic ideas. Now, before and after, 4 kings under the Shichibukai have had accidents under the hands of Yagami Kangdu. In addition to Crocodile, Moonlight Moria, and Doflamingo, the pirate empress also had an accident. And what angered the world government even more was that the empress was not destroyed by Yagami Kangdu. Instead, he gave up the status of Chiwahai and threw himself into the banner of Yagami Kangdu. It's abominable. Within the power of the world government, one of the 5 old stars couldn't help but curse. Wu Laoxing next to her said with twinkling eyes, "Pirates are unreliable. When giving her the status of Chiwahai, you should consider the current situation in advance." How to destroy Nine Snake Island? The Wu Laoxing next to him, with anger flashing in his eyes, suggested. It would be fine if it was destroyed by Yagami Kangdu. Such a blatant betrayal is undoubtedly a great blow to the majesty of the world government. If this kind of thing happens too much, it will make many people think that the world government is not as scary as the Iori pirates, and the Iori pirates are more scary than the world government. This kind of thinking is extremely dangerous. And when the pirate empress joined the Shichibukai, Vegapunk had not yet researched that kind of a warship with a turbine power and a seafloor stone base that could traverse the windless belt. Which was hiding in the windless belt, that it was decided to make the other party the Chiwahai. This was a very important factor. And now, there are warships that Vegapunk is researching that can easily cross the windless belt. There is not much danger even entering the windless zone, and the natural barrier of Nine Snake Island no longer exists. No. The 8 Gods Kangdu is not a foolish person. Since the pirate empress is brought under his command, it must be taken into account that we will turn our face. The sword-wielding 5 old stars stood there, a hint of coldness flashed in his eyes. Someone next to him took it and said, "That's right, maybe the people from Yashin Kangdu are now on Nine Snake Island. Rashly send troops to attack, you will suffer great losses." Chapter 291. Soul Fruit, a new idea. Discussions come and go, but in the end there is no conclusion. The matter was shelved by the world government. After Nine Snake Island was listed as one of the vassal states under the command of Wangguo, Yagami Kangdu stayed on Nine Snake Island for another week. On the future development direction and planning of Nine Snake Island, he had an in-depth exchange with the female Emperor Han Kuk, and comprehensively expounded the keynote of sustainable development. Yagami Kangdu spoke highly of Hancock's contribution to Nine Snake Island and determined that Nine Snake Island has independent autonomy. The planning and management are still decided by the Queen alone, and when the nations are threatened, Jushi Island needs to send troops to help. A week later, Yagami Kangdu left Nine Snake Island by boat, and Hancock personally went to the pier to say goodbye. With a little red cloud on both cheeks, under the sea breeze, there are thousands of amorous feelings. On the rough sea, a sailboat sailed slowly. Nina took a newspaper she just bought from Newsbird, came to the side of Yagami Soto who was sitting on the deck, and said, "The bounty is 550,500,000, and the government seems to be really angry." Yes. The newspaper published the news that the Empress unilaterally gave up the title of Chiwahai and became one of the vassal states of the 10,000 kingdoms. Therefore, the world government has added a reward of 550,000,005 Bailey to the Empress. Speaking of the Empress, the strength of the Empress is not too weak. The reward of 550 million 5 Bailey is neither low nor high. Considered high. It's good to be on fire. Yagami Kangdu took a look at the newspaper and said with a smile, "It's better to be mad at the 555 old people. The world government will fall into chaos, and the guys behind the scenes should jump out directly." Nina hesitated for a moment and said, "Is it a little reckless for the Empress to publicly announce that she will give up the 7 Wuhai Treaty and join the nations? Now the other 4 emperors are keeping a lot of vigilance against us, as are the world government and the navy. The power of the 8 gods pirates is huge. After defeating the Whitebeard pirates, he is already the leader of the 4 emperors. It is precisely because the 8 gods pirates are too powerful that their strength has been expanded even more after they were publicly joined by Germa 66 and the Pirate Empress. Today, whether it is the navy, the world government, or the other 4 emperors, they have all maintained great vigilance against the 8 gods pirates. Just think. 4 pirate groups with little difference in strength to maintain distance and balance between them. But if one of the pirate groups becomes more and more powerful, and gradually opens a big gap with the other pirate groups, then this balance will gradually be broken. With the intelligence capabilities of the world government, sooner or later you will know about the Empress." Yagami Kangdu said calmly, "Instead of, let the world government voluntarily announce the revocation of Hancock's Chihuahua position and send troops to encircle 9 Snake Island, it is better for Hancock to give up voluntarily. Wang Guo is not afraid of being alerted by them now, because no matter whether it is a white beard or a redhead, they will not take the initiative to attack, and the same is true for the Navy and the government. And making this kind of big news makes it easier to attract strong people who are willing to join in the world, forming a virtuous circle." Hearing Yagami Sudo's explanation, Nina was thoughtful. Clearing the table, Nina chuckled slightly teasingly, "Hancock. When did you start calling the Empress by her first name?" 8-God Kangdu's expression remained unchanged, and said, "A more intimate title will help to narrow the distance between Wangguo and 9 Snake Island, and form a harmonious and mutual aid situation." Nina smiled and wanted to say something, but Yagami Kanto smiled softly, touched Nina's little head and said, "It doesn't matter who I call my name by name, you are the only one who can call me by my name." Nina just looked at Yagami Kangdu with a smile, her starry eyes were bright, and her long smooth black hair was gently blowing with the sea breeze. The time has passed the 19th year of the Great Pirate Era and entered the early 20 years of the Great Pirate Era. There are still less than 2 years before the time when the original Middle Road flew out to sea. 1 month after returning to Wangguo, Yagami Kangdu's will almost recovered. Murasama has also adapted to the situation of burdening one soul incarnation, and can make the second soul incarnation. Whether the incarnation of the soul can eat devil fruit or not is a question. Before making the second soul incarnation, Yagami Soto summoned Gelds and Caesar to ask and discuss this issue together. The soul fruit has been held in it for decades. It didn't fall into the hands of Yagami Kangdu until later. Neither Gears nor Caesar had a specific understanding of the incarnation of the soul. However, the soul incarnation made by Yagami Kangdu before can replace the personality and soul of other people in the form of corpse seals, which is a basis for judgment. Caesar pondered, since the power of the devil fruit can be integrated into the weapon, it should not be a problem to integrate the soul incarnation. No. Gears shook his head and said, "It's not that simple. The soul incarnation of Lord Yagami Kangdu is strictly speaking not a specific substance, and has no body in itself." Caesar retorted, "But the incarnation of the soul can fuse the illusory flame, thunder, and directly make Hormes, and it should be easier to fuse the real devil fruit." Caesar also knew about Hormes. After all, when Yagami Kangdu was experimenting before, he created a bunch of Hormes in the base. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 292, Hurricane Fruit, the experiment failed. Say so. Gears turned his head and said, "But you can be sure that the Hormes made is not a talking devil fruit." This. Caesar was stunned. There is no doubt that what Yagami Soto wants is a hurricane that can exert its power. Instead of a devil fruit with eyes, mouth, and talking. If the real devil fruit doesn't work, I can try to extract the power of the devil fruit. Caesar said to Yagami King. Yagami Kingdu said, it's the way to eat devil fruits for items. Yes. Caesar nodded and said, but there are still some differences. That method extracts the liquid energy demon fruit. You may need something more abstract, more difficult, but not impossible. Iori Kingdu rubbed his chin and thought about it. Then I will first try to make the soul incarnation eat the hurricane fruit directly. If it doesn't work, I will use your method. Yagami Soto can give life to dead objects and turn them into hormies. It can also extract the soul from the dead, so there is no worry that the soul incarnation will be wasted after merging with the devil fruit. What's more, soul is incarnated or destroyed. Murasama can create countless soul incarnations, but it can only afford the existence of about 666 soul incarnations. Simple explanation is, a fruit tree can bear hundreds or thousands of fruits in decades, but it does not mean that it can bear these thousands of fruits at the same time. Only 5 or 6 soul incarnations can exist at one time. This is Murasama's current limit, unless its strength is increased. After making the decision, Yagami Kingdu no longer hesitated. He pulled out Murasama, his will condensed on Murasama's sword, and the power of the soul fruit brewed and condensed. It was the first time for Caesar and Geltz to observe the activation of the soul fruit's ability at close range, and both of them stared intently at the blade of Yagami Kingta. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds 3. Iori Kingdu's will is getting stronger and stronger, and there is a strange substance on the blade. The strange substance kept squirming and dripping from the blade. When this squirming thing reached its limit, Yagami Kingdu swung his sword. An invisible sword light flashed and threw it out. Papa! The squirming thing fell to the corner of the wall, tumbling up and down, turning into a group of dark slimes with strange light. I have seen the incarnation of the soul once before, and I have personally made glutinous rice. Geltz was not surprised by this, his expression became dull. Contrary, Caesar is very interested in this slime. But he knew that this was the soul incarnation of Yagami Kingdu, and of course he did not dare to make any request for research. After making the second soul incarnation, Yagami Soto let out a sigh of relief. The first soul incarnation is his immature work, as for this second soul incarnation. Because he already had a certain amount of experience, he deliberately raised it to the limit, and only then did he activate the ability of the soul fruit to cut it out. This soul incarnation is at least 30% stronger than the previous one. Soul incarnation. The burden it brought to Murasama was huge, but it was also placed in high hopes by Yagami Soto. Compared to the puppet-like glutinous rice, Yagami Soto wants a Homitsu who is similar to Pugel's Metheus and Zeus floating next to him at the moment. And if it's strength, it's better to be several times stronger than these two. After taking a breath, Yagami Soto took out the hurricane fruit from his pocket. This devil fruit is similar to other natural devil fruits, but the color is cyan, and the pattern on it is the pattern of a rotating hurricane. Raise your hand. The hurricane fruit crossed an arc and was thrown towards the slime-like soul incarnation, and finally fell precisely into its mouth. The incarnation of the soul made a swallowing action. Yagami Kanto looked expectantly. But just after the soul incarnate and swallowed the devil fruit, its body suddenly froze. Then it began to rapidly shrink toward the center, and was finally sucked into the inside of the hurricane fruit. And on the hurricane fruit, eyes and mouths finally appeared. Boss! The revived hurricane fruit jumped at Yagami Kingdu and opened his mouth. Yagami Kingdu. The last thing I want to see is this situation. However, Iori Kingdu still had a glimmer of hope in his heart, and said to the hurricane fruit, "Can you release the power of a hurricane?" No. Hurricane fruit jumped twice and replied to Yagami Kanto. Yagami Kingdu. The funny scene made Jeers and Caesar couldn't help but want to laugh, but neither of them dared to laugh, so they forcibly held back. Yagami Kangdu sighed, and with a wave of the blade in his hand, he slashed at the hurricane fruit from a distance. The hurricane fruit trembled, and the eyes and mouth disappeared. A strange thing wriggled out of it, and reincarnated into the image of a slime. Chapter 293, Two-Level Reversal, Hurricane Hormies. Yagami Kangdu walked over, picked up the hurricane fruit, looked at Caesar, and said, Go and try your method. Yes. Caesar nodded, took the hurricane fruit, and walked to his laboratory. Within the laboratory, in front of a delicate instrument, Caesar put the hurricane fruit in it and started the machine. After a sound of ding ding dong dong, the hurricane fruit, which was turned into countless pieces, was poured into a beaker. Who had already prepared, took the beaker to the test bench. Carefully take a sealed test tube from the test bench and pour out the purple liquid in it. ZZ. Pour the purple liquid into the beaker, immediately. Make a sizzling sound. Caesar did not hesitate, immediately. Picked up another thing holding a green viscous liquid. Pour it into a beaker and seal the beaker. ZZZ. The inside of the beaker seemed to be boiling, and it began to crackle and explode. After a while, Caesar opened the beaker. At this moment, the contents of the beaker had turned into a mass of viscous black liquid, and countless debris fragments. Caesar carefully took out a piece of cotton gauze. Said to be cotton gauze net, it is actually made of seafloor stone. A filter net that divides the seafloor stone into extremely thin silk threads, and then weaves it out. Belongings are one of the most precious instruments, brought from the base of the scientific forces. After the filtration of the Halu stone net, all the debris is filtered out, and the rest is viscous black liquid. Caesar dripped in a few more strange drops, and then the liquid began to purr. Countless gases evaporate and rise up and dissipate into the air. Ultimately, half a cup of cyan liquid appeared in the beaker. It is said to be a beaker, but in fact the beaker is also made of Halu stone. And the liquid in it is the state that can be fused with matter. This liquid devil fruit can be fused with matter, but it will not be fused with sea stone, so it can only be stored with sea stone. Caesar lifted the beaker with forceps and placed it on the central test stand. Okay. This time, Yagami Kangdu watched the whole process of Caesar's production, and his face showed an expression of understanding. He knew that the chemistry teacher's coffin board might not be able to hold it. Without hesitation, Yagami Kangdu waved his hand, and the slime-shaped soul incarnation squirmed over and swallowed the strange liquid. This time is very different from before. When the strange liquid fuses with the soul incarnation of Yagami Kanto, immediately, from a viscous blue liquid, it turned into a small whirling hurricane. The soul incarnation slime shrunk crazily, rushing into the hurricane. And the hurricane got bigger and bigger, eventually reaching the size of a basketball. Crashing. As the hurricane became bigger, a strong wind was also rolling in the laboratory. Like a tornado, the countless experimental equipment around it swayed. It seems to be a success, huh? Lulululu. A smile appeared on Caesar's face, but before he could laugh, the wind suddenly increased sharply. In an instant, everything in the entire laboratory flew up and revolved around it. Even Caesar himself could not escape the influence of the hurricane. It was blown into a mass of gas by the wind, and it was twisted into the center as it rotated. Ah! Caesar screamed and struggled desperately. But what is terrifying is that with his strength, he can't get rid of the wind of the hurricane. The dizziness of being swept up by the tornado is about to be unbearable. Yagami Kangdu grabbed a piece of gas and pulled him out of the hurricane. Gels, Lord Yagami Kangdu. Caesar looked at the messy laboratory with tears in his eyes. Iori Kangdu smiled and stared at the hurricane. He didn't look at Caesar's expression, and said without turning his head, "You will find someone to rebuild it later, and ask Gertz for any resources you need." Hearing this sentence, Caesar finally wiped away his tears. At this time, the rotating hurricane finally gradually became smaller. Finally, a group of miniature tornado-like things appeared in midair. It has eyes and a mouth and looks at Yagami Kanto. Boss. There is a subtle connection between Yagami Kangdu and the incarnation of the soul, which he can vaguely perceive. How powerful is this seemingly miniature hurricane? This is not a Hormes made from a natural hurricane, but a hurricane incarnation made from a natural hurricane fruit. You know. The hurricane fruit can be eaten by anyone, and it can create a powerful existence. This is a natural devil fruit that is not inferior to ice and fire. Go. Yagami Kangdu waved at Hurricane Avatar and walked outside the laboratory. That hurricane incarnate instantly followed up, flying around Yagami Kangdu's head. Leiju was approaching. She heard the movement here. Something happened. He rushed over in a hurry. Phailu reminds you. 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 294. The Incarnation of the Soul Comparable to the 3 Disasters. Looking at Leiju who was rushing towards him, Kangdu Yagami's heart surged with playfulness, and he flicked lightly at the hurricane incarnation that was spinning around him. Huh! A gust of wind whistled out in an instant, blowing from bottom to top. Leiju didn't expect that there would be wind in the base, and she was caught off guard, and her clothes were blown up all of a sudden. Just when she exclaimed and subconsciously reached out to press it. Due to the strong wind, her clothes could not hold up. Ah! Yagami Kanto's expression stopped. Not like breaking the clothes. He expected, the wind was a little too strong. She activated the transforming device hanging on Leiju's waist, and the viscous liquid surged up, instantly wrapping her body. After doing all of this, she then looked at Yagami Kangdu and asked with a strange expression, Master Yagami Kangdu, what's the matter? Ah! Iori Kangdu turned his head to look at Hurricane Avatar and shouted angrily, look at what you've done. Hurricane Incarnation said aggrieved, it's clearly under your control. Yagami Kangdu. Probe grabbed the Hurricane Incarnation, and Yagami Kangdu dragged it out. After being stunned for a while, Leiju said with a playful smile, if Lord Yagami Kangdu has any opinion on my clothes, just tell me, why use this method? Anyway, I can't resist your orders. If it were normal times, Leiju dared to say such words in his ear, Yagami Kangdu would let her know what it means to be powerless to resist. As for now, Yagami Kangdu dragged the Hurricane Incarnation, as if twisting his ears, and took a step forward. Step out. The whole person disappeared out of thin air and left the base directly. Seeing Yagami Kangdu disappear, Leiju shook her head slightly. Pulling the Hurricane Incarnation to the outside world, Yagami Kangdu directly took him to a height of 5,000 meters, which is the middle position between Sky Island Bika and Cake Island. He loosened his hand and threw the Hurricane Avatar out. Boss! Hurricane Incarnation trembled. 8 gods Kangdu snorted, stared at him coldly, and said, come, let me see how capable you are, and bring out all your strength. Hurricane Incarnate looked timidly at Iori Kangami Kangdu's order and it couldn't help but listen. After a while of grievance and fear, he forced his courage, closed his eyes and shouted. Level 8 Gale. As it screamed, it was originally only the size of a head, it began to swell and grow in size in an instant. In an instant, it reached a width of several meters, and it continued to expand, gradually becoming thick and long. At the same time, a strong wind whistled and blew wildly towards Yagami Kangdu. Of Yagami Kangdu, they will be blown away like leaves in an instant. Even Iori Kangdu, if he didn't resist seriously, he would be blown away by the strong wind. What breaking 5 tricks? After resisting the gust of wind from the Hurricane Incarnation, Yagami Kangdu couldn't help but twitch slightly at the corner of his mouth. What are the names of these tricks? I can't even read them backwards. The incarnation of the hurricane was still screaming with its eyes closed, and the gusts of wind swayed in all directions, and the white clouds that were blown thousands of meters away were cleared away. This is purely, the force in the body is violently and frantically rushing out, not even a trick. I really can't expect the Hurricane Incarnation to have any fighting skills. Yagami Kangdu rubbed his brows. He gave up the idea of fighting against the hurricane avatar, and walked towards the hurricane avatar against the strong wind, reaching out and grabbing its body. The power is too scattered. While Yagami Kengdu reprimanded, he grabbed the hurricane incarnation. The power of the incarnation of the hurricane was all gathered on his right hand and wrapped around his right arm. With the movement of Yagami Kengdu's thoughts, the violent hurricane began to shrink crazily. The gigantic hurricane, which was dozens of meters in length, shrank back to the size of a head in an instant. Immediately after, 8 Gods Kengdu's eyes flashed, and his 5 fingers grasped in the void. Sized hurricane turned into a cyan sphere, spinning in his palm. This is not a hurricane incarnation under normal conditions, but the power of a fully erupted hurricane incarnation, all compressed and gathered into such a small ball. Whoosh! Yagami Kengdu flickered a few times, came to the sea thousands of meters away, and threw the small ball in his hand towards the sea. The ball whirled and flew towards the sea. The moment of contact with the sea, the violent wind pressure compressed inside it. It exploded in an instant and swept in all directions frantically. A terrifying storm enveloped an area of dozens of meters in radius. In an instant, the seawater in this area was cut into innumerable pieces. Underwater fish, not even a drop of blood spilled. He was completely strangled without a trace, and the lethality was extremely terrifying. This is the power that normal should have. Yagami Kengdu looked at this scene and nodded slightly. This kind of power, and a head-on blow to the 8-foot Changu Jade of the Yellow Monkey, may not be much inferior. Chapter 295, Broken, Full Firepower. Under his hands, it is not difficult to defeat Kaido. After the eruption, the wind pressure gradually disappeared, and a small tornado appeared in the center. It was the incarnation of the hurricane, who looked at the 8 Gods Kengdu aggrievedly. Boss. Yagami Kengdu originally hoped that the hormies made by his own soul incarnation would not be funny. However, the fact is that it is not attached to the entity, and only relies on the ethereal wind to exist, and it has almost no memory, thinking and these things. Compared to the sticky rice puppet made from the body of Katakuri, this hurricane incarnation can be said to be stupid. Can the trick just now be released independently? Yagami Kengdu shook his head, stared at Hurricane Avatar and asked. Hurricane Avatar asked dumbly, which trick? Iori Kengdu almost forgot that Hurricane Incarnation has almost no memory, only simple thinking ability, at this moment a black line. That it is a bit difficult to turn a hurricane into an independent battle. After sighing in his heart, Yagami Kengdu calmed down. You can't fight independently, you can always be by your side. I can use the power of the Hurricane Incarnation to attack at any time, but it is another method. In the case of hiding the ability of Naruto World, with the assistance of the Hurricane Incarnation, even if he faced the 2 Emperors of Kaido at the same time, he could easily deal with it. Mention crushing the 2 Emperors, they can always be invincible. Whoosh! Yagami Kengdu grabbed Hurricane Avatar again. Any case, the easiest trick is to force it into consciousness. The incarnation of the hurricane, which was held by Yagami Kengdu, exploded again under the control of Yagami Kengdu. Turned into a huge tornado, and then contracted again, turning into a typhoon. This trick is called Hurricane Collapse. Yagami Kanto threw the wind ball to the sea again. Boom! A big fish with a body length of more than 10 meters happened to swim by, and under the hurricane collapse, not even the slag was left. Almost, in the blink of an eye, the whole fish disappeared out of thin air. After continuous training, I don't know how much, Hurricane Avatar finally forcibly remembered this trick. Its own without the help of Yagami Kengdu. Yagami Kanto also doesn't expect the Hurricane Incarnation to live much tricks, while training it, while thinking about the development of the power of the hurricane. Hurricane Crash is a small-scale, almost single-body explosive attack. Even the beast's Kaido couldn't ignore this blow. Its power was not much weaker than Akainu's ghost dog, fire breathing and other tricks. With a single burst attack, That would also require a large-scale group attack. Hurricane crash. Hurricane incarnates dozens of meters away from Yagami Kangdu, eyes closed, and shouted as if giving up the treatment. Waving the small silk-like arms, the body suddenly expanded and then compressed again. Turns into a one-typhoon ball and smashes itself into the sea below. As it continued to erupt, the nearby air gradually became unusually humid. This is because the hurricane collapsed, twisting a large amount of seawater into mist. Okay. Yagami Soto stopped Hurricane Avatar. Coming to the side of the hurricane incarnation, he once again grabbed the body of the hurricane incarnation. After controlling the power of the hurricane within it, the figure flashed into the air at a distance of 100 meters. Om! The hurricane expands and turns into a huge wind pressure visible to the naked eye. Under the movement of Yagami Kangdu's thoughts, countless tiny linear wind blades that were almost invisible to the naked eye suddenly burst out from this wind pressure, flying towards the sea. Kai, 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 kai. Wherever the wind blade went, the sea was instantly cut into pieces, slashing at the sea with their swords. That is, in this short moment, hundreds of slashing strikes burst out. Compared with the 8-foot Changu jade of the Japanese ape, although the wind blade inspired by this move will not explode, every wind blade will explode. It is formed by strong wind pressure. Has extremely strong cutting power, not much worse than the slashes of ordinary swordsmen. I don't know how this trick compares to the 8-foot Changu Yu of the yellow monkey. Yagami Kangdu looked at the broken sea below which was cut by the continuous wind blades, and thought while touching his chin. It is difficult to fight two admirals at the same time. In particular, the admirals of this generation are all naturally capable. Cooperate with each other, although the combat power won't be doubled, it is no trivial matter under the cooperation. If Qingzi unleashes the Ice Age with all his strength, the four emperors such as Kaido and other beasts can resist with their arrogance, but their strength, speed, and arrogance will all be affected. In this case, if Kaibu bombarded frontally, even Kaido of the beasts would not be able to fight with 1 against 2. But it is almost impossible to do anything else, and it must be completely suppressed. Relative. Today's Yagami Kangdu was suppressed by the power of the world of the pirate world. The body of immortality can ignore the attacks of Kizaru Qingzi and others, but it cannot annihilate the combat power of the 3 generals. Phailu reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 296, The Power of the Hurricane, Alabasta. With the hurricane incarnation, the situation is completely different. The incarnation of the hurricane is itself a gust of wind because it is not bound by the body. It contains is almost endless, and there is no concept of being exhausted. And as long as Yagami Kangdu does not die, it will not die. No matter what kind of attack, it can't be effective. This is the horror of hurricane incarnation. What 3 days and 3 nights of war, 10 days and 10 nights of war, for hurricane incarnation, it is all pediatrics. As long as Yagami Kangdu is willing, the hurricane incarnation can fly over the naval headquarters, blowing the Navy headquarters with 8-level winds for 10 consecutive years. This move is called hurricane cutting. God's Kangdu is too lazy to bother with the name Bachi Chongfengyu in the Wind River era. The hurricane cuts, it is simple and clear. After a few seconds, hurricane incarnate reverts back to a small tornado. For hurricane avatar, this extremely powerful wide area move can't be used consistently. But after releasing it once, you only need to wait for the last 10 seconds and you can release the next time immediately. And there is no concept of tiredness, it can cycle indefinitely. With a single area attack and a large area attack, what is still missing is a long-range attack. After the hurricane collapses, the cyclone must be released quickly. Can't delay, and can't fly far enough to form a long-range attack. As for the hurricane slash, although the flying distance is far enough, the damage and power will decrease with the distance, and it is not a single burst attack. Yagami Kangdu's detective grabbed hurricane avatar. Under his control, the power of the hurricane gathered crazily, gradually emitting a dazzling light. Turned into a blue silk thread and was held by Yagami Kanto in his hand. When the power of the hurricane was condensed to its limit, Yagami Kanto's eyes flashed. Holding this silk thread, he waved it violently towards the sea. Sigh. The thread flashed by. The undulating sea suddenly became eerily silent. Time seems to be here. Here the frame is frozen, and the whole sea stops. And in the next instant, the sea directly in front of Yagami Kanto was abruptly divided into two. An abyss appeared, as soon as it reached the end of the line of sight. This move is called Hurricane Air Slash. Yagami Kanto nodded with satisfaction. The three tricks he simply developed were all perfect use of the power of the hurricane, and would not cause too much loss. After creating Hurricane Crash, Hurricane Slash, and Hurricane Slash. After these three tricks, it's time to train Hurricane Avatar. Let Hurricane Avatar remember three tricks at the same time, which is comparable to letting Yagami Kanto recite English words. It's almost remembering here and forgetting there, remembering here and forgetting there. Fortunately, Yagami Kanto has a strong character. While exercising the incarnation of the hurricane, I am also practicing. Reluctant to endure it, and it continued to practice day by day. Took several months for the simple thinking of hurricane incarnation to finally forcibly memorize these three tricks. Released without relying on Yagami Kanto. Alabasta, here is the fore-end of the first half of the Great Route. Since Crocodile was killed by Yagami Soto, Alabasta has been safe and sound until now. But this one is safe and sound, just in relative terms. In fact, this is a country on a great voyage, and there is no concept of complete safety. Not far from the coast. A pirate ship is docked here. On the deck of the pirate ship, a girl with sky blue hair, about 14 or 15 years old, was tied to the mast by ropes, with a white cloth stuck in her mouth. Woo. Girl was naturally unwilling to be bound and struggled constantly. But no matter how hard she struggled, she couldn't break free. The pirate sitting on the deck next to him glanced at the girl, held a cigarette, and grinned. Save your strength, we won't hurt you. You are a precious hostage worth $1 billion Bailey. I said, such a poor place can really make $1 billion Baileys. A pirate came over with a wine bottle and burped. The person next to him squinted his eyes and said, it's a kingdom anyway, how could it be impossible to make up $1 billion Baileys? But to be able to catch a princess so easily, the legendary Great Route is not so good. The girl tied to the mast is indeed the Princess of Alabasta, Nefelta Liwewe. This group of pirates is the overlord of the West Sea, and not long after they entered the Great Sea Route, they decided to do it after arriving in Alabasta. A big vote. Originally intended to sneak into the palace, but was discovered by the guards. So I didn't do it again and again, and simply kidnapped Princess Weiwei. Don't be too happy. Elderly pirate with a scar on his face next to him said solemnly, Alabasta is a subsidiary country of the world government, and the navy will come at any time. So just give them one day, and if they can't send the ransom, don't blame us for attacking this princess. A pirate took the call, holding a short knife in his hand. She gestured twice to Weiwei, who was tied to the mast, causing Weiwei's body to tremble slightly. Chapter 297, Princess Alabasta, Neferu Talai. Weiwei. 1 billion Baileys. Alabasta is not rich in the first place, and it has to pay the heavenly gold every year. As the Princess of Alabasta, she knows how exaggerated the ransom is. What a burden it must have placed on Alabasta, her bound little hands clenched tightly into fists. But just as she kept blaming herself in her heart, the corner of her eye suddenly caught a glimpse of the sky in the distance, and her expression was startled. In that direction. A white cloud is flying towards this side, and there seems to be a shadow on it. That's what the front is. Is it Alabasta? On the white cloud, Yagami Soto was sitting there. Nina next to her was looking at the island that appeared in front of her from a distance, and asked with her chin in one hand. Not long ago, the intelligence force discovered that the new 9 members secretly dispatched by the world government were searching for the blueprints of the ancient weapon Hades. Judging from its appearance, it seems that there is a design drawing of Pluto. If the world government obtains the ancient weapon Pluto, it will definitely have a great impact, and the intelligence personnel quickly reported the situation to Yagami Kangdu. Yagami Kangdu naturally knew where Hades' design blueprint was, but he had no interest in this blueprint. Because of the body of the ancient weapon Pluto, he is not unable to find it. After thinking about it, Yagami Kanto decides to come to Alabasta to find out the ancient weapon Pluto. With his current strength, coupled with the power of the 8 gods pirates, holding ancient weapons is not a problem at all. Even if the world government was shaken by it, it would not dare to take any actions such as looting. Besides, even if the world government really takes action, the Yagami pirates will not be soft-hearted. Come down. Yagami Kangdu patted the white clouds below him. This white cloud is an ordinary island cloud, but it was infused with a soul by Yagami Kangdu and made into a flying homets. The speed is about the same as that of an ordinary ship, and it is better than being able to fly. Of the hurricane incarnation can also be increased. Island Yunhomies responded and landed towards the island. Nina noticed the ship on the sea, but didn't care. For her now, seeing a pirate ship in the first half of this great route really doesn't give her any attention. Yagami Kangdu also ignored the pirate ship, but he inadvertently glanced, and there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. Take a closer look. To the mast is not the Princess of Alabasta, Neferuta Liwewe. What's the matter? Yagami Kangdu touched his chin, revealing a strange look. Reached his current position, the worst thing that can make him pay more attention or care is a pirate at the level of Chiwahai. In addition to Chiwahai, some more impressive plot characters can also attract his attention. What's wrong? Nina noticed the change in Yagami Aoto's gaze and asked a question at the same time. Following Yagami Kangdu's gaze, he also looked at the pirate ship on the sea below. Iori Aoto would pay attention to a pirate ship, which surprised her a little. Nothing, I saw something interesting. Yagami Kangdu smiled. Unexpectedly, the sand crocodile was killed by himself. This Alabasta still could not be peaceful, and even the princess was kidnapped. After thinking about the overthrow of the world government, to establish a new kingdom, including all the countries. Weiwei should be the only heir of Alabasta, and she is also popular among the people. There is nothing wrong with the country being run by her. This time, many pirates on the pirate ship also found that there were figures on the island cloud. What the hell? Watch out, there's someone up there. After all, this is a great route, and many pirates on this ship have conquered the West Sea. I have also seen many devil fruit abilities, and I am not very shocked to see a cloud of white clouds floating in the sky. Vivi is the same. As the Princess of Alabasta, she has also seen a lot of devil fruit abilities. This kind of thing that can fly in the sky may be some kind of special means of transportation. Just don't know who rides on it. It stopped. Just when many pirates were stunned, they suddenly discovered that the white cloud that was going to pass over from the sky suddenly stopped in the air. This stop suddenly made everyone vigilant. Many people took out their weapons, picked up the fire guns, and made a defensive posture. At the same time, Weiwei also looked at the white cloud in surprise. She saw the white cloud slowly lowering, revealing 2 figures standing above the white cloud. A woman, the woman has no impression, but the man is vaguely familiar, as if he has seen it somewhere. The man's eyes were very calm, and he looked at her so calmly. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 298, Spike, the palace guards appear. Immediately afterwards, she saw the man raised his hand and made a simple gesture towards the woman beside him. The woman raised her arm, clenched her fist and waved it away. At the same time, all around the body began to be covered with terrifying blue steam. Boom boom boom. A terrifying shock wave suddenly appeared, and almost in the next instant, a series of sounds of broken bones sounded in her ears. When he looked around in shock, he saw all the pirates on the ship collapse to the ground. Putong, Putong, together with the captain of the Jackal pirates, Jackal, this pirate with a bounty of 40 million Baileys. Everyone fell in this second, and the whole ship was silent for a moment. And at the next moment, Wei Wei felt that the rope that bound her was being untied. In his mouth was also torn off, and his freedom was restored. In amazement, she heard the man say another word. "Let's go." As the voice fell, the man smiled at her. The white cloud quickly carried the two of them, flew towards the coast, and disappeared. Wasn't until the figures of Yagami Kangdu and Nina disappeared that Wei Wei reacted. She stood up, and first she looked at the pirates who had fallen in a row in shock and inexplicable. Aware of these, after all the pirates were killed, she took 2 steps forward and rushed to the side of the ship's side. But at this time, she couldn't find the shadow of the 2 people just now. Those 2. Wei Wei knew that those 2 people saved her, but she didn't even know each other's name. But that man made her a little familiar, and she always felt that she had seen it somewhere. When Wei Wei was stunned, another figure gradually appeared on the coast. Leader was the king of Alabasta, her father, Neferutali Cobra, and the guards of Alabasta were next to him. "I saw the pirate ship." The captain of the guard stood next to Cobra, and his face immediately turned when he saw the pirate ship off the coast, showing vigilance and awe. Next to him said to Cobra, "Your Majesty, please step back." However, Cobra was not the last, but still walking in front of the team. Looking at the pirate ship from a distance, his expression was very calm, but he couldn't hide the anxiety in the depths of his eyes. However, just when he and a group of guards arrived near the coast, they found that there was no shadow of a pirate on the pirate ship. Only Princess Wei Wei was standing on the side of the ship, waving at them. "Sure. You said 2 people killed the pirates." Cobra looked at Vivi in surprise. He knew that Vivi would not lie, and said, "Do you know who they are?" Wei Wei shook her head and said, "I don't know." After the man and the woman killed the Jackal pirates, they left without talking to her at all, nor giving her a chance to ask or thank her. Cobra turned to look at the guard next to him. There was a trace of cold sweat on the guard's face, and he said, "All the pirates have their ribs broken," and listening to the princess's words, "It seems to have happened in an instant." Break the ribs of all the pirates in an instant, and it's in the air. There was also a look of surprise in Cobra's eyes. He already knew the origin of this group of pirates. It was the Jackal pirates, and the Captain Jackal offered a bounty as high as 42 million for Bailey. But after hearing what Wei Wei said, there was still no resistance in the hands of the man and the woman. Like his subordinates, they were all destroyed directly. The adjutant bell of the Kingdom Guard said solemnly, "Your Majesty, although I don't see it in detail, according to the description of Her Royal Highness, it should be some kind of devil fruit ability. Being able to kill a boat of pirates in an instant, and at a distance, is obviously not something that can be done with normal tricks." Cobra nodded, agreeing with Bell's statement. "This is the Great Root, and devil fruits are not uncommon." Bell is the devil fruit ability person, the falcon form of the bird fruit, and has the ability to fly. That's right. Wei Wei frowned slightly, thoughtfully, and said, "Among those 2 people, there is one person I think I have seen somewhere." Because of the distance, she couldn't see clearly. Addition, it was only a glimpse, and the other party left immediately after making a move, without giving her a chance to examine it carefully. Now, it can only be searched by memory. "Where have you seen it?" Hearing Wei Wei's words, everyone present couldn't help showing strange expressions. Of Alabasta, although she is outgoing and cheerful, she often ran out of the palace to play when she was a child. But the contact with the outside world is still much less than that of ordinary people. Addition, she is only 14 years old, and she has seen even fewer people. And having such a powerful strength makes Wei Wei feel familiar. If these two conditions are combined, it seems that it is difficult to find a person who meets the requirements. Chapter 299. Mysterious Man, Terrible Guess. Those two aren't the Navy, are they? After thinking about it, Cobra asked Vivi. Wei Wei nodded, although she couldn't see it clearly, but the clothes on the two-person ship were obviously not the uniforms of the Navy, nor did they have a cloak of justice. A group of people thought hard, but still couldn't think of who it was. Cobra finally shook his head and said solemnly, in any case, they saved Wei Wei. If there is a chance to see it in the future, I must thank them in person. Wei Wei hummed and followed Cobra and the others back to the palace. But along the way, he has been frowning slightly, bowing his head and thinking continuously. This feeling of familiarity, but no way of thinking about it, is very confusing. After an unknown amount of time, everyone finally returned to the palace in Alabasta. Vivi and Cobra got off Kaluduk's back and walked towards the palace together with the captain of the guard and others. After returning to the palace, Cobra picked up a bounty on the coffee table and said to the guards, by the way, inform the Navy that the Jackal pirates have been eliminated. Yes. The guard next to him responded. At this moment, Wei Wei, who was standing on the left side of Cobra, was stunned for a moment. Subconsciously, I took the Jackal's reward from Cobra. What's wrong? Cobra looked at Vivi strangely. Wei Wei looked at the reward order in her hand, and a gleam of light gradually lit up in her eyes, and said, I remember, that person, I seem to have seen it on the reward order. Bounty order. Cobra was stunned for a moment, then his face changed slightly. Or either pirates or vicious criminals. Such a person would actually save Wei Wei. He couldn't believe it. However, Wei Wei sees the flash of inspiration in her mind, and without planning to let it go, she said to Cobra, Father, the ones issued by the government. The reward order is. Although it was a little unbelievable, Cobra still said, in the archives, I'll let someone get it. Well, it should be a little more. After ordering the guards to get the reward, Cobra sat on the chair, showing a look of contemplation. If the person who rescued Wei Wei was really a pirate, what was the purpose of the other party? No matter what, in the end, Wei Wei was saved. No matter what. Whether the identity of the other party is not the sea, we must thank the other party. The guards quickly brought in a lot of bounties. Cobra hesitated for a moment, and let the one who left the bounty order above 50 million Baileys. Being able to easily destroy the Jackal pirates is definitely much stronger than the Jackal pirates. If more than 50 million Baileys are screened, the reward order will be immediately. Much less. But still a large stack was sorted out and stacked on the coffee table. Wei Wei rushed over and looked carefully one by one. Because it is a reward order kept in the archives, it is very neatly arranged. The reward amount is arranged in order of high and low, which is convenient for inquiry. On the top is a pirate with a bounty of 50 million Bailey, and after a glance, Vivi swept it away. Looking at the second one, then the third one, the fifth one, the eighth one, the 19th one, the 34th one. Under Wei Wei's continuous page turning, soon this pile of bounty orders has been turned over by more than half, but still no bounty orders can be found that can match the figure in memory. Haven't found it yet. Cobra sat next to him, watching Vivi turn over the bounty. Seeing that she has turned to the pirates with a bounty of more than 200 million, she couldn't help but ask. Wei Wei shook her head and continued to scroll back. In her mind, there was only Yagami Aoto's face that was slightly blurred because of the distance. When she turned to Nina's reward, she paused for a moment, feeling a bit like the woman she saw today. But if she wanted to find the man, she let it go first. After that, the bounty amount for pirates started to get higher and higher. 400 million Baileys, 500 million Baileys, 650 million 6 Baileys. Cobra watched, when she saw Vivi pull out 650 million 6 Baileys of pirates, he could not help shaking his head slightly. Could it be that you remembered it wrong? The pirates above are all influential figures in the New World, and they all have the qualifications to serve as the king's 7 wuhai. If you want to go further, not to mention, it is either the signature character of the 4 emperors, or the existence that even the Navy headquarters has a headache. What's more, he was originally strange. How could the pirates save Wei Wei? Not only Cobra, but even Vivi was a little suspicious at this moment. Because she has already turned to the $1 billion pirate, and there are not many more. Maybe I'm really wrong. Wei Wei responded and continued to look back. Only the last few pictures were left. Red-haired Shanks, Kaido of the Beasts, Kangdu of the 8 Gods. Wei Wei was about to turn over the last few sheets subconsciously, but at this moment, she was suddenly stunned. He flipped the one that he turned over just now and turned back again, and the person staring at this one blinked his eyes. The atmosphere came to a standstill. Wei Wei took a deep breath, her eyes showed a hint of shock, and she took a second look in disbelief. I found it. Phailu reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 300. Shock, the head of the 4 emperors. Cobra was thinking about things with his head down, and he didn't watch Vivi turn over the bounty. Hearing Wei Wei's words at this moment, he couldn't help turning his head. The moment he saw the reward order, he was also stunned. It's him. That's right, it's him. Wei Wei took a deep breath. Hearing Wei Wei's answer, Cobra's complexion suddenly changed drastically. The captain of the guard next to him, Adjutant Bell and others were all dumbfounded. Looking at each other, they could not help but take a deep breath. The 4 emperors turned out to be the 4 emperors, and the 4 emperors actually appeared in Alabasta. The cold sweats of Cobra and the others all flowed down instantly. The 4 most powerful 44 pirates that dominate the New World, the 4 emperors. It is an existence that is difficult to annihilate even for the world government. No matter where it appears, it will cause a huge storm. 4 emperors. Captain of the guard was covered in cold sweat, staggered back 2 steps, and almost fell down. Cobra took a deep breath and said, calm down, that guy saved Vivi before, maybe things won't be so bad. Do you want to report to the world government? Bell asked in a low voice. Cobra said, the Navy should be coming soon. Don't rush to report the past, but the Navy's coming may cause a worse situation. 4 emperors, that is enough to make the naval headquarters look like a big enemy, and 1 or 2 troops are useless at all. If there is a fight in Alabasta, the kingdom may be destroyed. Fortunately, Yagami Kangdu didn't seem to have any hostility, and he rescued Wei Wei on the way. The only thing I don't know is, what is Yagami Soto doing in Alabasta? Try not to alarm anyone. After thinking deeply, Cobra said slowly, don't go looking for them, send someone to look for them secretly, and report to me if you find them. Yes. Bell nodded, turned around and walked out. And just when Cobra gave the order. To the west of the Alabasta Palace, Alabasta's Burial Hall. Also known as the Royal Tomb, it is a solemn scene. The funeral hall at the moment, the figures of Yagami Kanto and Nina are standing on both sides. Both of them are searching for the underground passage leading to the underground hall. Since Nina was not lurking in Alabasta, she naturally did not know the location of the hidden stairs. But Yagami Kanto and her are both observant and meticulous characters. In this fixed range, looking for a secret passage, it is not difficult. Besides, if you really can't find it, a sword will split the entire funeral hall apart. Didn't do that. I just didn't want to make too much noise. And since he had saved Wei Wei before, it's better not to dig graves on the graves of her ancestors. It's here. Nina found something unusual. Turned out to be an organ, and after opening it, a secret passage leading to the underground appeared. 8-God Kangdu came over, glanced at it and said, it should be here, go down and see it and you will know. Saying that, he stepped into it first, not afraid of traps and the like. Nina was a little curious, How did Yagami Kanto know that there was a secret passage in this funeral hall? Yagami Soto knows that Alabasta has clues about the ancient weapon Pluto, which is normal, because this is one of the information collected by the intelligence force. But where exactly this clue is, the intelligence forces are still at a loss. And she is also not clear, but Yagami Kangdu seems to know this matter like the back of the hand. Fortunately, she has gotten used to the fact that Yagami Kangdu learns some unreasonable news from time to time. After being slightly curious, he shook his head slightly and followed Yagami Kangdu down. After going underground, a solemn building appeared in front. In front of this underground ruin is a square stone tablet. History. Nina's eyes lit up when she saw the stone tablet, and she walked towards the stone tablet. Look at the text above and read it word by word. Today, she has seen many pieces of history, including several pieces of intelligence history. There has been a lot of understanding and inference about the history of the blank 100 years, but many places are still unknown and guessed. How about Pluto's clues to where? Yagami Kangdu came over, glanced at the historical stone monument, and asked Nina. Nina stepped forward, reached out and touched a string of words in the corner of the stone tablet. There was a look of thought in his eyes, and then he nodded thoughtfully, saying, "There is indeed a clue to Hades, its location is... Alabasta. Coast. A warship came slowly and docked on the coast. What's the matter, doesn't it mean that the princess was kidnapped?" A Navy colonel on the warship, holding 2 cigarettes. He frowned and looked at the pirate ship not far away, as well as the corpses of a large number of pirates that were carried to the shore.